Heya, doctor, how you doing? I've heard that it's really good for patients to be very restful. So did you get a good night's sleep? Good. I also got some food here. My auto cooker and everything is all set up. I've made myself some lovely little bits of toast. So what do you want for breakfast today? Uh, did you spend all night trying to come up with that, my good doctor? You're only hungry for answers. um, that's kind of cute, honestly. But, Doc, you need to eat. Please. Um, also, there is, only a few answers I can provide. I can't answer what happened at the clinic. They seem to be trying to cover it up. And that unfortunately means that you have to stay with me for a little bit longer, forcefully. I'm sorry about that, Doc. Oh, not answers about that. You didn't expect me to answer. That's nice. Thank you. Then, my past, right? Okay, Doc. Can you eat first, please? Because it is a little bit of a longer tale, and you will be the first person I've told the full story towards, so it would give me some time to think about where to start. Yeah, the auto cooker is right here, and here's the settings. Give me a bit. Oh, you've cooked your food now. Thank you, Doc. Can you lay down over there? I think I found a good place to start. You wouldn't know that much about the background of my environment, but I still need to kind of talk a little bit about how my background was different than what you may imagine, and what parts are similar, because that's pretty important between patient and doctor, whatever, background and all that. So I'll tell you a little bit about how my containment zone was more special for its time. And to this day, I believe it was still special. um, I've told you a little bit about the cullings that happened every year. A lot of us kids didn't know why. And obviously, I've told you that you had two choices. You either would die, or you would do something before your death day to prove your loyalty to the corporation, and then they would take you in under ability that just stripped you of your free will, basically. You're still yourself as a person, to my knowledge, but you have no ability to resist any order that's given to you, as long as it's done under the company's umbrella. Yeah, I'm sure you can imagine how that's been abused, especially against the children. But anyway, those dogs aside, um, there was other exceptions that were sometimes made. That was if somebody had a power that was useful, but not in a way that would undercut the sanctity, quote unquote, of the company. So, for instance, in the place I was born, a few years before my birth, around 5, I believe, there was this one person who awoke a power, B grade, like myself. But their limitation was that they could only grow in a very small select field that had to be prepared in advance. Due to this, they couldn't grow any crops or anything outside of the wall, something that would show to the outside world that, hey, not all of us are evil or villainous or something. So the company, thinking that they could save on some level of cost for food, let them live. The treaty that was originally signed also does make it so they have to give us a minimum of a certain amount of food, and with the additional food that we more got from the B grader, well, our place had more food than almost any containment area, even though it's triple with the population. Due to this, my family felt comfortable enough to give birth to a child, and also due to the amount of food that was more available. While there were definitely those after the baby boom who would die of starvation, there was at least enough food for a more quote-unquote civilized town to be made. Due to this opportunity, my father displayed his skills as a brewer, and, well, that gives you quite a bit of political protection, as long as you don't lean on one side or another too much. The different gangs and groups within that area, everyone liked the wine that my father produced, and due to that, nobody would mess with him. And my mother, due to the additional income from there, was able to learn how to sew, and somebody who's actually skilled at sewing, well, a lot more higher-end clients, especially there, would come in, and with the amount of power, political or otherwise, that they held in that relatively small area, we were doubly protected. It all went wrong when I was born, I guess, though not immediately. I was born and I grew up in a way that the tradition of everywhere else here was, because while my parents were protected, children in an area where every other year there's going to be like a mound of bodies, including parents, in case they try and hide the child. Well, children's lives are not seen as that valuable until they pass their awakening day. And with that as the case, I wasn't granted the same protection as my parents. And like most kids my age, I got into a lot of fights. Luckily for me, my parents were wealthy enough to smuggle in a baseball bat. Just like this one over here. It's not the same one. I've had it confiscated many a different times, and I've had to buy new ones, but a steel bat is really good, especially if most of the other kids that you're fighting against are malnourished. They generally aren't that strong. I grew a bit of a reputation, and I grew in my skills, especially in fighting. I even had enough time to pick up a trick that was more done to impress my parents. I would later, luckily, I suppose, use this trick to great effect, but I'm moving forward in the story just a tad. So to get back on track, I would get into a lot of fights and bruises and a few broken bones, until the day of my awakening more happened, and that's when everything changed. I would wake up, and I didn't even know it was my day of awakening. My parents didn't keep track of the day of my birth. It isn't really normal to do that there. But anyway, due to this, it came as a complete surprise to me when I woke up one day, and I could smell the alcohol and hear just the incessant buzzing all around the house before I woke up. And lo and behold, the first thing I saw was so many flies just flying all over the place. It's a swarm. And I didn't know how to react other than just to run the heck away and swing my bat. I may have even killed some of them. I don't know. And I tried finding my parents through all the ruckus, because they wouldn't let so many flies be in the house, right? And then I found the stench of alcohol. A huge amount of our front carpet near the door had been completely drenched. There was little bits of alcohol that had fallen around it, but most of it seemed to be on the carpet that we had. Just right in front of our door, a sign of, how wealthy we were. I assumed at the time, I believe, that we had been raided, that somebody had broken an agreement and just, they didn't notice me. I didn't know why the flies were there as much, but you don't have the time to really consider those things back then when you're in a panic. So I quickly grabbed my bat that I already had when I dropped it and ran out the door. And I hid for a few days. I think 2. I think some people noticed me, but they were trying to figure out what happened to my parents and if they were still alive. On the 2nd day, I heard that the building that I was in was set ablaze to get rid of all the flies. Then a few days after that, I don't recall, everything there is a bit of a haze. I would have a man dressed in all black carrying these black suitcases, some on his back, some on his shoulder, some on his arms, and 2 in his hands, and he'd walk up to me, and he would say that he could tell me what happened to my parents. But in return, I would owe him a favor, and I would have to play a game. Now, I wasn't a blind, naive kid. Anyone who grows up there knows that there's always something behind those deals, but at this point, I could tell whenever I grabbed my weapon too hard, it would start lighting up, and while I hadn't tested it on anything, I knew that meant that I had awoken a power. And, well, I thought maybe that may be something that would get me killed. I didn't know about the calling, I think, back then. But in a gang war or thrown into something else without the protection of my parents, well, that seemed to add up enough. So, with death seemingly inevitable on either side of things, I agreed. After all, perhaps I would finally know what happened to my parents, and maybe they weren't dead, right? Maybe they were just kidnapped. And I could finally figure that out and point a few people in that direction. That's what I was thinking, I think. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be the case, though I would learn that both of them hadn't technically died when I saw them. Though for one of them, the technicality is quite a standard. I would later confirm this knowledge back when I got out, but my parents had both awoken their powers. Because remember how I told you, when somebody of a higher grade awakens their power, there's some energy that releases out in the area? And the closer you are, and the lower your talent, the less energy you need to awaken. Well, my parents were both F's grades. They didn't need much energy, and as you can guess, houses there were really small. And my parents' abilities, if you haven't been able to guess where this has been leading, was my father had an ability to transform his body into any liquid that he touches. More limitations based on him touching it, and it was hard to have control. You had to practice a lot more for it, and you wouldn't be able to regrow anything that had transformed. Now, this could have been maybe a cool party trick with, just having your hair fall out. A pretty useless ability, but I guess my father was working on some moonshine at the time that I awoke. And thinking back, it's most likely that if my father did know that it was my awakening day, if I had something that was survivable, he was planning on just giving me my first booze. And I know, it's very, very young for somebody that age, but back there things are different. But instead, his body, to my understanding, looking into some people which were able to read the past, his arms started transforming into the liquid moonshine, and he started to run. And I don't know if he felt pain or not, but just seeing your body gradually more transform into a liquid that you can't control and then running away, probably outside to try and get help, but before you could even reach the carpet, his whole body more transformed at once, and that explains the stain, right? At the very least, I can be comfortable with my father because liquids like that don't have a brain. Unlike other people who can transform, it's just water, it's just wine. There's no magical property to it. So, my father, whenever that reached his brain, truly died. My mother, however, would not be so fortunate. Remember I said there was a buzzing? You're getting it now, Doc. I knew you were so smart. My mom had an ability to fracture her consciousness, and in return would have many different bugs fly out, each carrying a fraction of what makes her her emotions, her memories, her viewpoints, everything. And when you divide a person into flies, apparently that relies on a few million of them. My mom would be able to transform back. If all of them were inside the same area. However, any of them that died would mean parts of my mom had permanently been destroyed. And that's why I don't know in case I destroyed any, and even if I could gather all of them back over again, so many of them must have died, even in case the flies didn't die of old age, which is possible, I can admit. She wouldn't be her again. And there may not be any part of her even left to have a person come out of that. I tried a few years to try and get into it, but while I was able to leave the area, and I'll get into that, I was never able to get anything back in to try, no matter what routes I tried. Anyway, I'm skipping ahead so much on this story. I'm so sorry, Doc. Perks or downside, I suppose, of this being my first time telling the story. I'll get back to it, though. No, Doc, I'm fine. Where was I? Oh, I had accepted the man's offer after he told me, this information, and I was obviously devastated. And I don't know if I blanked out or the man, just quickly got something. There was some type of maybe time dilation, or if I was just more likely blanked out. Before I knew it, there was 3 other people inside the area with me. Oh, I skipped the area detail. Apologies, Doc. I was in this black room. No exits, no entrances, as soon as I accepted the deal with the man. And it was still complete pitch blackness, but you could still see in a way that you can't explain. I can't explain it. It's just weirdness of how powers work, I suppose. But the 3 other people I was with was one man that must have been, well, not man, little boy, that must have been of higher status because he was wearing glasses, and those are incredibly hard to get, so his parents must have worked quite hard for those. A taller boy, taller than me, and I was quite tall for my age, that had a brutish figure, and further away than all of us by a few feet was this girl with little strikes of blue in her hair. And the man started talking from every angle of the room, like there was loudspeakers in every part of the room, I suppose, and told us that the game that he had mentioned was that we had to kill each other. He could only carry one of us out. And well, before he even finished, the man with the glasses beside me had his throat ripped out. The lanky boy beside him had turned into some type of wolf creature. I had been gripping my bat for quite a while, and the man had to take a few steps towards me, which gave me the opportunity, even in my shock from my fight or flight responses, to swing really hard at the man. And then a visceral of gore. Even if I only hit his head, everywhere from his lower torso to his shins, all blew off into a liquid, flowing forward. And it's the first time that I felt the rapture and the beauty of the pink, red, and white all just done up like that. However, I noticed that the liquid started freezing midair, and I turned, starting to feel a bit colder. The girl further away from us had run away to get extra distance in the confusion, and she was able to control temperatures. A weaker ability, because somebody who can control strong temperatures would have totally freeze me immediately, especially with my weaker body back then. But well, it took this girl some time, and I started running towards her, but my blood started to freeze a little bit. So I picked up my little party trick, where I would throw my my bat towards something, and it would hit it on the dime. That's really hard to do with a bat, as you would imagine, so it works only really good as a party trick. And I threw it hard, and it didn't hit her perfectly, but it still broke her nose. Probably due to my, what I now know is superhuman strength. And well, that broke her concentration, and her power was suddenly non-existent. And I rushed forward towards her, and I beat her. I didn't grab my bat immediately. I just started pummeling her in a frenzy. I guess at one point I grabbed my bat, because when I came to again, all that was left was this mess of pink just all under me. And so to this day, that's the only time I don't think that that mixture looked so pretty. Before I could get too deep into that, though, apparently we started moving. I was the victor after all. Now, unbeknownst to me, the new organization at the time, the Villainous Association, had leaked the information this man was doing this, and a few heroes had started to react to stop this man. And looking back, it seems that the Villainous Association probably covered the tracks of everyone else as well. Because the man died, and all of the suitcase that he had on his body just fell in random areas. And out of them came us. That was his power, to put people into those little suitcases he had all over his body. However, he could only carry one person in a suitcase. Even if multiple people could be in a suitcase, normally he couldn't carry them unless there was only one person. There was no spatial fluctuations from that, so it didn't caught up on any sensors at the time. And that was how the whole organization was able to get people out of there. I don't remember the name of the organization. I don't think they exist anymore. The Villainous Association, when it eventually grew in power, struck them down. But we're going ahead again on the story. I was free. I didn't know why at the time, but I was suddenly free and the man wasn't around me. And I, for the first time, was able to see the outside world. And this is how I know I'm not a good person, Doc. Because a good person would probably be amazed, would be looking around the world, the beautiful type of neon lights, the lovely little caffeine areas, and the gardens, the birds. God, the birds. I never saw a bird before when we were in there. The little pets, the smiling faces. I will at least say I noticed the smiling face, but not for the reason, and not in that order. The first thing I noticed was the trash. And when I noticed the cafe areas. Cafe, that's the word I'm looking for. Sorry, I'm kind of starting to get a bit out of it, but I need to finish this all in one. I noticed a lot of them had tables that were empty with still food on the plates. And I started noticing that the garbage areas had a lot of uneaten food there. And I saw all the happy smiles on the faces, and I started to get angry. Because even just a quarter of the food that I was seeing thrown away just so casually in the area that I was in would have been enough for us to feast in there. And all of it was just being thrown away without a care in the world, without even recognizing how precious what you guys were casually throwing away were. A good person would have taken a step back and thought. A good person would have realized that something was wrong and thought more about it. But as I said, I'm not a good person, Doc. I raced into the nearest area and I beat up a few people. I stole some food and I ran away into an alleyway. In the following weeks, I would rob many stores. I would beat up many people, and I kept making excuses. I would keep coming up with ways that it was justified for what I was doing. That, hey, these people were supporting the companies that kept us all in bondage. The people who they celebrate as being virtuous were the same ones who were funded by the people who left mass graves openly struck up just to incite fear in us. So I struck out hard. But after the first few weeks, I recognized that that wasn't healthy. I calmed down enough that I could have made a different choice. But I didn't. I was calm enough to do research to learn about the differences between the Hero Association and the company heroes. I researched into knowing about how the companies worked and how people thought what was happening inside the containment zones were. That they were humane. That they were deserved. All because of one theory, that, hey, what's in your blood determines your power. So I went to get myself registered. Not completely, I did it in a back alley type of way. But even if the differences here are quite pronounced compared to in there, there's still some similarities in how the underworld or the black market work. So I was able to get to work. And I learned that I was a B rank. Not only that, a very strong one at that. And I come from two weak parents that were F grade that couldn't even awaken their abilities. And that's how I knew in that moment that that theory was bullshit. Something made up to keep us where we were and make people believe that that was the reason that we were there. This would later get confirmed a few years later when I would learn that certain abilities, as long as a hero had enough money, could make it suddenly be an E-grade ability if they just paid an inventor enough to find some circumstances to mitigate the issue of previous F-grade abilities. And a normal person could have perhaps gone over and dissuaded the crowd, proved through so many different abilities to look through my memories and publish them. And there were so many ways I could have gone about it, but I just saw people eating up all these lies and not even questioning them for a moment, and I just got angrier. So I made a choice. I made a choice to strike out even harder, because this world was going to ignore all the pain and go over and say that was right, it was justified for us to feel how we were and be treated the way we were due to what was in our blood. How did they have any right to be treated differently? So here I am as a sweet, seemingly innocent kid, coming up towards people and tricking them, and either leaving them alive if I thought they were kind of cute, if they were seemingly nice in the short interactions I had with them, or leaving a pretty mess. Eventually I got caught, but not by any heroes. You know, back then, the Villainous Association was not the strongest. It was somewhere around the top 20, I think. But there were much worse monsters back then. And unfortunately for me, I got caught by some of them. They saw potential in me, and they taught me how to fight. But they saw potential in me in other ways as well. I was lucky in the containment center. I realize now my parents were very wealthy, and due to that, certain things never happened to me. I didn't even know it was a thing back then because my parents never taught me. But as you know, I am very attractive doc. And while I have all my toned muscles now to give me a different look, back then I had a bit of baby fat on me all over. A much more adorable look, I was told. And well, the villains of back then were not as courteous as the villains of today. I'm sure I do not need to go into extra detail, but I was able to kill them after enough time. I was attractive enough that they didn't notice that when I grabbed something in my hand and I started glowing red between my fists and I struck them with an open palm, that something may have been a little wrong because, as stated before, I just need an object to grab. Something as small as a nail would still work. It just takes longer to charge. And I was able to get my way out of there. After that, I was a lot more careful until, where was I? 15 years old, I believe. And then I was found by the Villainous Association. They had started growing in power at this point. They were among the top 5, I believe, at this point. And they were a lot more safer. And they had a good reputation. And I had just had a big fight where I was bruised and very much damaged. So I took shelter with them, and that's one of the only good choices I've ever made. The Villainous Association is made of villains like me. Those who were used, broken, and hurt by society. And while we do our own type of shenanigans, things happening to children or things of that nature are completely shut down. The noblest group that you could have for villains, and it's the only reason why they are the strongest group right now. Heroes don't target them as severely, because it's better to have good villains than ones that were more dangerous before. They were so courteous that they were willing to hear my tale about what happened in the bloodline containment centers, and willing to give me some aid. Not enough to fully go against the corporation, certainly, but some tips on what I could do. Certain targets that I could reach myself. And I am still thankful for that, even if I messed it up so bad. Because, Doc, I was 15, but I was still angry. I was still holding a rage towards the world, even if I had been finally touched by an actual kind hand. But because of that kind hand, I had hope. Short-lived, but I did have it, so I spared some store owners that seemed to hold some political weight. And I told them the plight that I had, why I was doing what I did, and I was able to either blackmail or convince multiple store owners to aid me in advocacy. Use their weight and money to aid my people that were trapped within those walls. A month passes by. 2, 3. I'm getting angsty, but I'm trying, and the advice of others to calm down. 5 months pass by, and I see no change. 6, half a year. I'm almost 16 now, and there's been no change from me sparing many lives. So I make another choice, and I strike out, and sometimes I would leave the store owners alive after I had joined different groups, because then you had more places to get money, food. But I decided to make a big mess out of all of them. Beautifully done, I will say, even if it was a bad choice. It was supposed to be a symbol that people who betrayed me, betrayed my people, would meet that fate. But I didn't understand that they were doing their best at the time because I was a child. Change can't happen instantaneously, especially against a corporation like that. And only having small store owners, they were making gradual, small little changes in public perception, and I threw that all away by murdering each and every one of them mercilessly into a big public display. I confirmed that some of us were born wrong. After all, this is what they do to their advocates. What would they do to their enemies? I handed the greatest propaganda to make sure that my people stayed in those jails. In all but name. All because I couldn't control myself. All because I was angry and I made a wrong choice. The Bonus Association let me back in. I got looks, but people understood. And they didn't know my age, at least. And apparently, many of those people had made similar mistakes before. But anywhere else, I had no chance to be in. I was given gigs, jobs, and gradually I became a second hand to many different villains. If they wanted to have somebody who was reliable, who they could trust, well, that kid that they grew up within a lot of the containment zones, that kid who grew up learning the good values of the Villainous Association, they wouldn't betray you. And they could also batter up against some pretty strong heroes. They couldn't do some grand heists all by themselves, but I was a really good muscle. I was seen as always the second best in operation. Unless it was something very grand, but even then I would be hired. And, well, I earned my money. I've already told you that I checked in the past information and tried to make some efforts into the containment areas, but that was all for naught. Eventually I had to settle for the knowledge that I had just ruined everything. That my choices were so meaningful, but I had ruined and thrown away all my good choices because I was angry. And because I thirsted for violence. And I just had to live with that, and then I, due to my choices, had no other way to live but to continue fighting. And when you know that, you start leaning into loving it so much more. And well, I naturally already had a love for beating people into nothing. A good people doesn't feel that naturally, Doc. A good person doesn't lean into their violent side. A good person doesn't lean into becoming a monster. But, well, I naturally was one from the start, now wasn't I? Whether it's the impact of my powers, the way that I love blood, or the effects of those around me. I told you different theories of power, no? One is that there's the almighty being that started all powers, and the subsect from that, which is that there's some all-powerful being controlling everything we do. I can see the first one. The second one I don't agree with. All my mistakes are mine. I fucked up. I killed those people. I lashed out. I was born crazy, but I'm the one who decided to keep going like that, Doc. I am the one who refused help, refused better counsel, and acted out impulsively on my own. No one else. No God forced me to do that. That's all on me. Yeah, sure, my first 3 decisions that I made are understandable. A child doesn't want to die. So, me reacting the way I did makes perfect sense. Me reacting in fight or flight and killing literal children. That's understandable as well. Fight or flight, right? Third one, the anger. I was very young at the time. Maybe that's understandable, but I was a smart kid, and I should have known better after a few weeks of calming down. There was another way. I could see the other way. I contemplated it even, but I chose not to go that way. I chose to be an icon of vengeance, of pain, bringing the suffering that my people and myself had suffered for so long and giving them a taste of it to this world. It seemed on the outside just so perfect. I know now that that is not the case. But back then, compared to what I used to have, it certainly did. But there's a third theory, remember? The one on your personality? That one I lean more towards. But I have my own spin. From what I can more view as a consequence of everything I did. Because what does my power do? I hold on to something, and the longer that I am a part of it, when eventually I let go, or I let that energy just flow, something explodes. And what's been my history, Doc? My family, the longest time I've been in part of something, had both fates worse than death inflicted upon them as soon as my powers awoke. The first time I use my powers is to kill things. Children, even. And I find their deaths pretty. I then see the world, and I make small little explosions, small unnoticeable things, because I've not been part of it for too long, and then gradually, as I become more entwined with this world of yours, and all of you, I make an effort, months long, to build something good. And even if it would only have been a garden, something mostly decorative, but perhaps eventually bring some fruit in small, minute ways to my people, I saw it was growing too slow, and I burnt it down, creating such an explosion that no one would ever trust to give any faith in us again. I may hate the traitorous dogs that act against our people, who sell themselves and others out to work for their masters. But they are children when they make that deal. Much younger than I was. And they had no way of getting out of that situation other than to die. I can understand the choice even if I myself would have perished. But I've done more impact than any of them could ever wish to do to our people when I was free. I am a walking disaster. Anything I touch, as soon as I let go, as soon as something happens, a switch flips, the longer I'm a part of something, the bigger the explosion. Now that seems quite in line with my personality. If we put it like that, my power. Now doesn't it? And yet still, I want... No. That's a bit much, I think. I'll be leaving it there, Doc. I think I'm gonna go. I have my food. You've gotten yours. You know how to work this food section, so you're all good. But I need to go. I'm not telling you what that last part is, Doc. That's not part of my backstory, so I don't need to tell you. I didn't promise to tell you that, not to die. You have the pieces now. And I'm sorry. I gave you an unfair choice. Because it was supposed to be me breaking you compared to you fixing me. But I'm unfixable, Doc. I was broken from the start. So I'm sorry for giving you a false choice, a false game. I realize that now. I'm sorry. Doc, please. I need to go. I don't want to blow up on you or have a large emotional reaction. I have control of my powers enough that I don't think that I'd harm you, but I wish to be safe. Thank you. I'll be leaving for now, but this is the food section. I've already explained that. God, my brain. Oh, God, I know I'm crazy, but I don't normally have this type of reaction. Anyway, Doc, yeah, I'm gonna be in my room. I'm gonna lock it just to be safe. However, I can break through my room pretty easily in case there's any intruders, so just give a holler. The security system here should let me know of any intruders before then, but just in case. Yeah. Anyway, Doc, I'm gonna be going. You stay safe, Doc. Doctor, you're a very kind-hearted person. You are a sweet soul. A rarity in this world. But I shall reinstate one more time. I had a choice. I had multiple choices that I could have made. And I recognize those choices even. I wasn't blinded by my rage as much as you may think. I knew I had multiple choices laid out before me. I was smart. I did not lose myself in my bloodlust. But I still threw them all away. I had many times to choose. I just always chose wrong. And with that, I'm going to be going. I do not wish to lose myself right now. Yes, yes. See you, Doc. I hope you're able to leave soon, if it's any comfort. Before, what inevitably happens to anything close to me happens to you. I don't think I'd be able to forgive myself for that, though. I think I've said too much, so, good night. I'll see you this morning. Or next morning. Apologies. Bye. Oh, hello again. So the story I'm sure so many of you dolls wanted. Something dark, gritty, filled with tension. Isn't that what some of you wanted? But fear not, I despise leaving my tales on a darker ending. I much prefer some sappy fairy tale ending myself. But to go more in detail about some things to leave it so in my lovely little observers aren't thrown into disarray, I'll be having somebody else come online to discuss it with you. Anyway, goodbye. I look forward to my next appearance. Why won't you fucking work, you fucking bitch? Oh, that's what we come back to. Okay. Hi. Sorry, the recording button wasn't working. I was holding it for like fucking minute, but it didn't work. That's weird. But hi, hey, so that was fucking dark now, wasn't it? But yeah, that's the first like super angsty audio I've made. And I've actually had to re-record this part because originally there was a different sound, that was like more in the background for the entire time. And my fucking god, it annoyed me so much that I decided to re-record. So, you know, luckily, it seems like I'll be able to finish this in one setting. My throat's gonna hate me, but hey, that's worth it for fucking this audio. But with that out of the way, I want to talk more about her as a character because while I understand the purpose of angst in a story to like drive up narrative tensions and stuff like that, I personally don't like my stuff that I create to be on a more angsty note at the end. Now, this is probably gonna make this like a super long video. Like the new re-recording is like 40 minutes. So you know that's gonna be a bit. So I'm going to try and keep this a little bit shorter, but who knows, this video may be an hour long. My god. Okay, so anyway, with that out of the way, I want to talk a little bit about how Impact's character has changed and the other impacts from here, because Impact has been a character that I've worked on for a long time and has gone through a lot of revisions actually while the story has been going on. She's gone through at least 3. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those different revisions. Now, the original type of character type that I was more using for her was like, oh, well, what do we have a character that breaks somebody into being gay? Because there's different stories that turn that into a straight thing, or breaking into, like, a lot of bad stuff. And I was like, huh, how do I do that in, like, a healthy way? Well, one, a person that does this is crazy. They have to be crazy. Okay, so, psych ward, got it. How do we make it so that way it's fine for my little isms, though? Oh, okay, I'll make it so that way the character is asking for consent, and that's just be, like, a thing that this character is doing. Because you can be crazy, and you cannot be, like, an asshole, right? And then afterwards, I added in some little things of, like, huh, how do I more make it so that way this is, like, still hot, and, like, semi can be seen as more consensual? Oh, I'll make it so that way the doctor character, which is inside this audio, which is the listener, is, like, checking out the character the entire time, and that's the reason why she's doing things, because, hey, you don't look at my boobs and stare at my boobs in such a way for a longer and longer period of time if you ain't fucking gay. And then you double check the information about, like, hey, you're being straight. Oh, somebody's experiencing some repression. Aren't you my good doctor? Now, of course, I fucked up the wording in the recording, but hey, that gets accounted for in later type of renditions that we're gonna have on this historic character. You may notice a little bit when I get, like, my voice more tired, I mess up words a lot more. That's just a natural part of me as a person. But hey, I was able to weave this into the character more, but we're gonna get into that later. So that was, like, enough to, I'm like, okay, this character, hot, still kind of consensual, but still kind of not, so that way people who like that type of vibe can still get it, but it is a lot more on the con side of non-con, right? Well, and also while there's a non-con thing happening, it seems more like nothing really major is going to happen, and at least in that rendition of the story, it was more going to be like, oh, kissing and making you, like, kind of moan and beg and stuff. Which, you know, that's what I'm going to be doing too as a character. That doesn't mean there's anything sensual happening. I would change that in the next part immediately after this, but hey, there was nothing really implied in my mind that had to make that sensual. So, it's a cute little audio, goes out, it's fine. I wait a few days, because I have to do some IRL stuff. I look at the statistics in the back and I'm like, huh, this is pretty interesting. So what about my statistics right now? Oh, I got some subscribers from that. I think I had like 3 subscribers from that video alone. And I was like, what? And then I looked towards the video and it has like 100 views. I'm like, doubly what? Now, of course, in the back end, people only watched it for the first few seconds or something. But that was still really impressive at the time. It was my first like big boom one. And still now, I think it's like one of the largest videos that I more have other than the lore video, which again, lots of people didn't watch and less people have liked that video. So still technically, this one video was the most important one kind of so far for me. So I went, huh. Like, this was not that big of a deal for me making it, so I was like, why do people like this audio so much? So I personally put in my headphones and I listened to the audio again. And I'm like, wait, the little tisms that I personally have as a creator on, like, non-con stuff and other things like that, and that I'm not okay making that type of stuff, and, like, the little tisms about, like, the type of teasing that I naturally engage in and other stuff like that, create kind of an interesting character when that's all done over underneath a crazy character context, of them acting in this type of way. Huh. There's a character here. That's, pretty interesting, huh? I wonder what I could do with this. But I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna fit this into anything else. Q&, I was already writing over for my first series at this point, Virtues and Villainy. And the first character is the one that's inside the second video, which is, the dorky villain. They're the main character of this thing. It's not Impact, actually. They're the main character that all the story parts of Virtues and Villainy is supposed to center around. But I more look towards it and I'm like, huh. This is a series I'm going to make. I'm probably going to stick to making stuff on this series. So, well, is it possible I could make it so that way it's connected to that series? It is a superhero one, so if I do a few retcons, yeah. Which is how the rest of the character more worked. Now, at this point, I had already recorded the dorky villain video. And due to that, I had mentioned, because going just a tad bit into that character, she's intentionally being a dork for her hero. She's proposing herself as some great villain that's actually a dork, and she's pretending to be a dork to get it so that way her hero, her little sunshine, likes her. That's her character. She's purposefully being deceptive towards that person. And as such, that's why she has the kittens already prepared, also to be, like, comforting towards her, and also, like, that seems like a dastardly ploy that's actually kind of cute. And in the same vein, giving the insurance stuff towards the containment zones, which is like, a place which I had nebulously kind of defined as like, okay, there's these different type of theories that probably would exist in a superhero world. One of them could be like this bloodline theory thing, and people with like bad bloodlines go here. That's just like a trope and stuff. That fits really well in my world. And that was just something to more go in and be like, haha, capitalism, sometimes bad. But then I had a little bit more of a thought of like, I kind of like the concept about this type of thing, actually, and like discussing this a little. But I don't really have a character I could really fit into that, can I? Well, then I immediately thought of the second character, the only character I was originally more planning on being on here, on the virtue and villainy stuff. The one that we now call Impact. Back then I didn't even have her name. And I'm like, it'd really fit in that this crazy character comes from this place that's supposed to be kind of quartered off and stuff, and then you can more talk about different type of issues and stuff, eh? And I can explore that part of my world. That's really nice. And since I'm a storyteller first and foremost, I latched onto that idea. So the entire reason why that character is part of it is merely because she's popular. Like, that's the only reason that we've gotten the videos so far. And secondly, the only reason why she was more there is that I was already making a series in my head and writing stuff down for it before I checked out in case that she was a popular character. So I was able to slot her in pretty easily. And then I was like, well, the Villainous Association has a lot of bad people in it, and I want to kind of connect all my characters that are villains into the Villainous organization, because this organization I can more see as like they're bad people, but they aren't bad people type of category. They're still villains, they still do bad things, and they still have kind of warped morality, but they aren't going to be necessarily like evil characters, because I'm not okay kind of speaking for evil characters. That's just a personal gripe. So that leaves me in like the little midline that I can make my morally gray characters, which are still kind of having some redeemable qualities. As such, I was more thinking, how do I make this all fit into like other stuff? And I used some real world inspiration, which is more prevalent now in the new reasons that are more going over in the backstory. I used, what is the name of it? Native American type of areas, which have been set off by the government. A lot of the stuff like the alcohol, the different gangs that are inside those areas, and the way that they're underfunded, but they still have to give a certain amount of food, but it's less food than they should be giving towards the area because people still starve and stuff, because those trees haven't been redone. Like, all of that comes directly from real world stuff. Like, that Native American stuff, because I took a course on Native American studies. With all that in mind, I was more thinking, okay, like, this is fine enough as a character. Then I said, okay, like, what would be, like, a fun way to more make this character different? Oh, I know, I'll make this character actually canonically trans. There's two characters which are canonically trans. There's a third character I may add in which isn't in this series, but, I will say the other character that is trans is not trans in the same way as this one, so I wanted to add an actual, like, normal trans person, even if she's crazy. But hey, most trans girls were kind of a little crazy, so it works, I think, right? A good representation. But with that out of the way, I started trying to think of like, okay, what's her power and what type of limitations can I place on her power that wouldn't allow her to break out of this place? Well, she has to grab an object for that, and the whole thing about the blood and everything, I added that in afterwards. Because of like a few lines which I saw like, maybe this character likes violence a little. Oh, okay, I can elaborate on that actually to like stretch out her character a little bit more. And that's how we got the second rendition of her character, like all the reasons that made all the parts up till this video. Now, I wasn't planning on making more Virtues and Villainy stuff for a while, due to some IRL stuff I'll go more in detail with on the 10 sub special. But due to Skylar having some really good reading comprehension with this tweet, I was like, somebody read this character really well, because like one of the main parts about her backstory, which has always been consistent from the start, is that she doesn't really have a lot of choices at the start. Not a choice in where she's born, not a choice in how she really reacts, and not really a choice in like killing people, because, the extermination thing was already set up very early on, because, my world's kind of fucked up. So, with all these things in mind, I was like, yeah, I'm going to make it so that way the character really cares about choices, and that's the reason why our crazy character really cares about consent and stuff. it was, again, all built off of my original characterization and all little isms that built into this character. And with all of that accounted for, I was now going one more time over her story, because it'd been a while since I've gone over, Impact's story. I'd made the other video, but I was just redoing one video to make the screen thing not actually frick up. So I was still interacting with the character enough, but I wasn't really going over her whole story. But going over her story one more time, I'm like, how would she feel about all the actions that she's done? Oh, she would have a guilty complex, wouldn't she? About all the different things that she's done, all the choices that she's thrown away, and even though she's really impacted by choices, she would think that all the choices that she had the liberty to make, she made the wrong ones, didn't she? Because the whole, murdering the store owner thing, I kind of had that planned. It wasn't originally murdering them, but at this point, like, it's more likely that her character would have murdered them than not murdering them, me taking a step back, looking at all the details I had for her character up till that point, so I'm like, okay, yeah, she probably murdered them, and that would also leave a more impact against, freeing her people, which she would feel really bad about, which has now caused the type of guilty complex. And also, with all these events lined up, how would she more interact with Doc? Well, she, for those who are unclear, she really actually likes Doc, and we're going to get into that more in detail in the next video, but she's also really afraid of her interacting with Doc to a little extent. But she's being more selfish in her mind by still wanting her and wanting all the advances. But her talking about all her past all at once flooded into her, and she's like, fuck, now I lay everything out all at once. It's not safe for you to be with me. Fuck. But you still have to be with me right now because I'm keeping you safer than the alternative. But as soon as you're able to leave, you should leave. That's now her new perspective going forward. And that was a change from originally when she was just like love-struck and going to be more completely into the Doc. I've also elaborated on the reasons that she likes Doc now with this new backstory reason and all the stuff with her, which we'll get into in the next video. Now, with all that out of the way, on like the background, like how her character was made, how her series continued to be more put into here, how she's apparently now a super popular character for the few people which watch his videos, I think I'm going to be leaving it at that, because my throat, if you haven't told for like a few times I had to pause, is starting to kind of like hurt. So I'm going to leave it at here. This video may be an hour long. My god. Hopefully not. But I'm going to leave it there, and hopefully my little fucking ramble about my character and being a geek about that was able to get rid of any depressive feelings that this video may leave some people with. And that's all. Also, I hope people picked up some lore. Perhaps something like this on the original recording? Oh, dolls, don't worry, she can't hear us. Anyway, with that little, what's the name of it, channel lore out of the way, I'm gonna be going. Bye-bye, dolls.